So thank you very much for having me on. And it's an important topic that we have to cover. But before I start on that, what I'd like to do is I would like to just say, like, the people in Australia, mashallah, the Muslims in Australia are a group that I really look up to. There's so much inspiration that comes out of Australia for me personally. I mean, over the years, Al Maghrib Institute Australia, they do an amazing amount of work. We have Talk Islam Media, which is, mashallah, they're a huge organization. They've got 2 million people on Facebook. We have One for Kids organization, and they've produced amazing animation since 2006. We have, mashallah, Muhammad Ibrahim, who's from Australia, who's got this fantastic, the Aware Academy, which is a global educational platform, basically aiming to raise awareness about the harmful impacts of pornography and irresponsible media. We have, mashallah, people like amazing counselors like Muhammad Rima. We have, mashallah, amazing life coaches like Sister Kalisha Bennett, and there's so many other amazing individuals from Australia, which I really do look up to. And the last time I was in Australia with my wife, it's one thing that I sort of like took back when I came back to the US was the Dawah scene in Australia is, mashallah, it's always pushing forward. I mean, Talk Islam in itself, I mean, mashallah, they do so much amazing work, and there's so many other organizations and individuals in Australia that are really spearheading Dawah. So I just want to thank all of you for being such an amazing group of individuals down in Oz, as they say. But look, today's talk, obviously, it's quite a deep topic. Obviously, we're talking about the courting dilemmas, emotional attachments, red flags, and really in the pre sort of like courting stages, what red flags to look out for. There's many things that I want to get into, and obviously time is limited. So what I would really like is all the folks that are sort of like joining in from wherever you are in the world, if I can ask you just to have something that you can write on, whether that's your laptop, an iPad, or your phone, or notepad and pen, just because I'm going to throw out some stuff, and I really want all of you folks to sort of like take as much advantage as possible and just take as many notes as possible as well. And inshallah, hopefully in the questions section, if there's any sort of like pressing questions, inshallah, you can fire them in via Facebook or Zoom, and I'll try my best to answer as many as I can. If not, inshallah, we'll try to get some answered afterwards and then put up on the event, on this Facebook events page. So look, I want to start off by basically saying that I'm going to tackle this entire issue of the courting, dating, so like the Muslim courting dating scene, what's happening on the grassroots level. I mean, this is what I do day and night. I'm dealing with individuals, couples, families from all over the world when it comes to specific sort of like relationship issues. And my background now and specialization in relationships has allowed me to not just access and sit with some real sort of like key figures around the world, both Muslim and non-Muslim, but allows me to sort of like understand the grassroots problems of what's happening within our community as Muslims. And so everything I'm going to be discussing today is from a faith-based perspective. And so let me just actually read you, I'll start off by reading you a message, one of like, I get so many messages, and I just want to give you a little flavor of the types of things that are going on in this day and age within the Muslim community, whether you're in Malaysia, Australia, the US, UK, mainland Europe, even places in Africa and the Middle East. The problems for me now sitting back and being able to analyze it, speak to clients from various parts of the world, there's a lot of patterns that I see, and not just myself, fellow coaches, therapists, counselors. I mean, whenever I get the chance, I sit down and I speak to fellow academics within this field. And it's funny, especially I'm talking about from a Muslim background, and they all say the same thing. There seems to be a disconnect between what is happening actually grassroots on the ground and what's happening sort of like within our community when it comes to some of our community leaders and people in position where they can sort of like give advice and sort of like move things forward, whether that's in the minbar during khutbah, or whether that's an imam or a sheikh or scholar. I mean, please don't get me wrong, there's some amazing work being done by our shuyukh, our ulama. May Allah Azza wa Jal preserve them all, increase them all in rank. But sometimes I feel that some of the things that myself and other fellow coaches and therapists have to deal with, there is a slight disconnect between what's happening on the ground on a day-to-day basis and what's actually being taught or advised to individuals, couples who get stuck into some really dark situations when it comes to anything to do with relationships. So look, let me just start off. Bismillah. So here's a message I just got, believe it or not, literally about 40 minutes before this session started. I got this message saying, brother, please cover the struggles of finding someone to marry who is sincere, genuine, who they say they are. I, like many divorcees, have been finding the whole process. And she's gone on to mention a plethora of different Muslim matrimonial websites. And she's gone on to say it's a total nightmare for me. Is honestly so debilitating, especially when you're treating the whole process with Allah at the forefront and maintaining integrity and truthfulness, and the other person doesn't. So many practicing players on there, subhanallah. And that last bit I want you to sort of like take heed of. We're talking about people who are practicing and non-practicing, but this sister has said that there's so many practicing players on there. So that's something I want to tackle a little bit further on and discuss, both from the practicing and non-practicing sort of like element and what's actually happening at grassroots level. And then the message continues. This month alone has been a nightmare. Meet one guy in person who basically told me I would need to compromise on my Islamic values in relation to physical contact. Of course, that did not go any further. Another one who I blocked today was basically shady, wanting to marry me only days into communication commencing. It is really a struggle, and being completely honest, while I feel like I am in my prime, there's a general idea amongst our brothers that marrying someone around my age, 43, who is a divorcee means we are desperate. I am more together as a person than I've ever been in my entire life. All praise be to Allah. I cannot tell you how much this whole situation can feel like at times. I just remind myself that Allah Azza wa Jal must have something really special planned for me, inshallah. But what about those whose iman suffers through this test? I really pray Allah makes it easy for us all. Ameen. So I wanted to sort of like give you a flavor. And obviously, I mean, it's not just, I'm getting messages from families regarding similar situation, brothers. And I mean, I had a brother recently who was he was like on the state of like a nervous breakdown because of what happened to him during the courting period. So it's not just happening to the sisters, it's happening to brothers, and even sometimes happens to collective families. I mean, there's whole issues that spring up. So really what I want to do is I want to tackle a couple of things. I want to tackle the courting dilemmas, and I also want to give these and some red flags to the brothers and sisters that are listening, some key red flags that you all have to watch out for, especially when you're in this courting stage for marriage. So look, I would also like I said, I want all you guys to have something to take note of. I wrote something on Instagram and Facebook a little while back, and I just want to read it out. I wrote, a reminder to all those who might be deeply attached to someone during the courting stage and overlooking red flags. The man or woman you choose to be your partner affects everything in your life. Your mental health, your peace of mind, the love inside of you, your happiness, how you get through difficulties, your physical health, your success, how your children will be raised, and so much more. Please choose wisely. Now, I'm going to explain 3 types of situations that I have come across over the years. And I've even mentioned in my book, there's a pattern that keeps on repeating again and again within our community, from a faith-based perspective within the Muslim community, wherever you are in the world, it's the same situation. I've I've come to sort of like discuss this many times now in different interviews, podcasts, and in classes and with my clients, that there's three sections, there's three sort of like groups of individuals during the courting stage. And I want you now to sit back and sort of like take notes and listen carefully to these three and try to place yourself in there and try to sort of like slot in where you are. Or maybe you're married and you're listening just now, but try to sort of like figure yourself out and where did I slot myself into these three sort of like types of groups. So here it goes. Group number one that I've come across and I discuss all the time is you get a brother and a sister, university stage, they're looking to get married. They find each other, one approaches one, they like each other. And then what ends up happening is that they sit, they talk a couple of times. Then from there, they exchange numbers. And then from exchanging numbers, they're they obviously connect via social media. And then what ends up happening is that they start to build up this rapport. And what ends up happening is they start to develop a deep, deep liking for each other. And what ends up happening is that slowly but surely, because boundaries are not kept, what ends up happening is this young brother, young sister, or even, I've seen this in all ages. I've even seen this with divorcees, but unfortunately, it's a pattern now. What ends up happening is that they like each other, they start to sort of like communicate, and then they start to transgress bounds. We have sacred boundaries. We have boundaries in place from a faith-based perspective, but that's kind of goes out the window. That starts to dissolve, and what ends up taking over is lust, attraction, and then slowly, a very, very deep emotional attachment is formed. How does that form? Through a hell of a lot of communication in private. And when I say private, on the phone, WhatsApp, on Google Hangout, whether it's on Facebook, FaceTiming. And then what ends up happening is that it becomes more and more secluded. And then it's like sitting there up into all hours of the morning, just chatting away, talking about everything under the sun. But then eventually starts becoming more flirtatious. They start to test the water. So you'll find that the sister or the brother will start testing the water, see what they can say, what they can't. But then when they see that the other partner is reciprocating what they're doing, it starts to build. And then eventually what happens is they start crossing bounds, they end up meeting, it becomes a fully blown relationship. It's almost like a boyfriend-girlfriend situation. And then from there, what happens is that it leads on to going out without any family members knowing. They're going out, they're literally just dating, and they start to then make out, and then from making out it becomes more serious, and then finally eventually what ends up happening is that they have obviously intimacy, they have sex, and that's sort of like the step-by-step process. And then obviously by this stage they're so deeply attached to each other that it's almost like it's not impossible, but it's very difficult, because in the background you have family maybe who'll find out, friends that will find out, and they'll be like saying, but he or she's not really, they're not really compatible with you, and there's this and there's that. And so people start to explain and give their suggestions or their opinions, or they might say, let's maybe slow it down, but they're completely involved now. And to the point where it's almost like this deep infatuation, and all they do is they think about the individual morning, afternoon, and night. They wake up thinking about them, they go to sleep waking about them, they're speaking all to each other throughout the night. It's in some cases it's a first time experience of being physical with someone, and then that's what happens. So this is one couple who end up getting to a point where they just can't let go. They can't see any red flags. They can't see any compatibility issues because they're so engrossed in each other. So this is one group within our community that you find, and that I find all the time that I speak to. So here you go, there's one, okay? Then you have the second group, which is, again, young or old couple, but they end up same sort of like pattern. They try to hold back, they try to have some principles, but then eventually the communication gets to a point where they start to sort of test the waters with each other, a little bit of flirtation here, a little bit of sexual innuendo here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they end up crossing the bounds. They cross the bounds, and they end up, something happens. Okay, that's group 2. Okay, and I'm going to explain. Obviously, they sound similar, but I'm going to explain something in a minute. So as group 2, they end up falling into something that they never wanted to, but they end up getting there. And there's group 3, who are just 2 folks. They meet each other, they like each other, and the first thing that they do is that they get their families involved, and they have the foresight to understand that if I get my family members involved or relatives involved, it doesn't mean that that's it, we're getting married. It just means that I have the protection of my family, that I'm keeping it safe, that there's boundaries. If I'm going to Starbucks, or if I'm going to Costa, if I'm going somewhere to speak to this individual, this sister or this brother, I'm going to take my brother or my mom or my dad or someone. They don't have to sit with us, they can sit away, but there's a checking mechanism there. Whether we're talking alone or we're talking on the phone, whether it's a Zoom call or whatever it is, it's where there's other folks. So they play it safe. They do it according to the boundaries and principles. Now look at this, yeah. What I've come to gauge is that over the years, myself and other colleagues have realized that group 1, when they're completely infatuated with each other, they've crossed all boundaries. When it comes to them getting married, they will go to the extent of twisting and forcing their family, friends, relatives to listen to them by any means necessary. And if not, they will hold them literally by the neck and say, this is the one I want to marry. Don't. And some of the language I've even heard that people have actually come to because they're in love or they're so emotionally attached, they're like almost like they'll challenge their families, and they'll be, how effing dare you like think like about this, about her, about this, about, and don't you say this, and like literally it gets to that. Like, if you don't allow this marriage to go forth, then I'm going to either run away, I'm going to phone social services, I'm going to phone this, I'm going to phone that, and say that you're holding me back, you're not allowing me to express who I am, and you're forcing me to do that. So it gets to that level, and then there's a lot of chaos in the home, even when sometimes, and I know there's different types of parents, there's different types of family setups. I understand there's some really nasty things that happen sometimes, but we're not talking about forcing here. We're not talking about parents forcing someone to get married. You're going to marry your cousin and that's it. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people that meet each other, but they start to get emotionally attached. And so these folks then wind up happening is they'll literally grab their family members by the neck and say, don't mess. This is the one I'm going to marry. And the pattern, this is what really scares me every time, because I have to deal with the aftermath of this, obviously, and I see it day in and day out. These sort of individuals will get married, and then it's so strange. But within 6 to 24 months, it all goes pear-shaped and it's over. Like, it just ends in such a horrific way that from absolute infatuation to absolute worst enemies. 2 sets of families are like against each other, both the husband and wife who end up marrying. It just becomes like they become vicious against each other. And I've seen this. I'm not saying this is sort of like what always happens, but I'm just saying I've seen this trend, this pattern happen with individuals who do this. And the key element is that they don't make tawbah. They do not turn back to Allah for all the thing. I've had some individuals that I was dealing with who a brother and sister were together courting for 5 years without their family members knowing. They were having they were having sex literally every time they met. She had to have within the 5 years, she had to have a secret abortion. Within that time, the family of the boy were like, no, not at all. We want nothing to do with this. Like, it was secret. And then when the family found out, and they were like, you two are just not even compatible, what ended up happening was the sister would sort of like like ask, like the sister's family, because they like the chap, will manipulate him and ask them to sort of like almost abandon his family and just come with us. We'll look after you. Why? Because he's academically endowed. He's maybe a doctor, an engineer, an architect. He has a solid job, and they think that he's good. He's good on paper. He's good, but what ends up happening is that when he comes and says, "No, I can't. My parents don't like it," then you find that the sister will manipulate him and her family will manipulate. Say, "No, don't worry about your family. We'll just you come. We'll do it." So it all becomes very messy. So the people that don't make tawbah, they don't turn back to Allah, things I've realized, it gets messy. And this is where we move on to group two. Group two now are the folks that basically start off, they do the same thing. They might have slipped up. They might have ended up talking online. They might end up, like the brother will be saying, "Look, can you show me take off your hijab? Can you take off this clothing? Can you take off that?" And after 6 months of talking, she's like, "Okay, I'm going to marry this guy anyway." She's revealing herself, or they're having online flirtatious intimacy online. I mean, these are the things it gets to. But group two, these are people that end up quite quickly realizing that they've crossed bounds, they've transgressed bounds. And I've had couples that'll come to me and they've like literally in tears saying, "We did this, we've crossed bounds and we've made tawbah, and tell me what to do. Like, I've made tawbah, I've done this and done that." And I'm like, "Look, as long as you've made tawbah, you don't go back to that sort of like sin, and you have solid boundaries up, get your families involved and start to move forward in a productive, empowering, halal way. Get yourselves together." And I've seen people who have fallen in the beginning, but then they've made sincere tawbah. And I mentioned this once before. I had actually a guy, this is obviously before COVID, who was so guilty of what happened and what he did, that he actually just went and booked himself a trip to Umrah. I mean, you don't have to do that, but you just making sincere tawbah is enough, and feeling guilty about it, not going back to that sin. But he did that, and the sister was so guilty that it was just, they really did make solid repentance. And now look, from part one, a lot of the times I've seen that they go pear-shaped. That group that do that sort of have that dynamic, it goes pear-shaped. Group two, it might not be smooth sailing, it might not be sort of like, but they have the teething issues as every marriage does, but it doesn't go drastically insane. It's not psychotic. It's like they're not complete enemies. It's like they get over it, they start, and mashallah, things pan out. This is a sort of trend I've seen. It's not sort of like straight sailing, but things pan out, mashallah, and they make tawbah and they move forward, and they have full family support, and they move and they do it. The third group, like I mentioned, are the people that play it safe. They hold themselves accountable. They stick to the boundaries, and alhamdulillah, they move forward knowing that they're not getting themselves into any problems, meaning they have some level of sort of like, okay, I'm talking to him or I'm talking to her alone, and I'm actually starting to feel something here. I'm actually starting to get really, really attracted to this guy or this girl, and I'm starting to develop feelings. But hold on, like I need to get family involved in it. And it's like they think like this. And that's what they do. They stick to the boundaries and they move forward. And then like a lot of my clients will say, they'll have 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 meetings, but they have it with principles and boundaries. And what ends up happening is they get married and bismillah, they move forward. So these are the sort of like the 3 types of courting dilemmas that I have realized over the years. And something that I want you guys to be aware of is that don't fall into this. Don't fall into these brackets. The only bracket you should really be falling into is bracket 3. It's this group of individuals that you have enough sort of like awareness, God consciousness, that and self-respect, that you know your stance, that you know exactly where you stand, and where you feel that there might be a little bit that you're feeling and you're starting, you hold back and you keep yourself, you have checking mechanisms on yourself to move forward. And like I mentioned in the beginning, like I read a couple of the messages, these, like the sister had boundaries, she had stuff set. And so whereas she mentioned in the end, if someone doesn't have boundaries and they fall into these things, then like what's there to protect them. And this is where, unfortunately, myself now and many other coaches and psychologists and therapists and psychotherapists all over the world, like myself as a relationship coach, I am dealing with a lot of the aftermath of a lot of shattered hearts. There's a lot, because when people don't do things according to some principle, and they don't have boundaries, and they don't sort of like, they're not aware of red flags and boundaries, and they don't have a certain level of standard that they keep, what ends up happening is there's a lot of shattered hearts, both men and women. The amount of people that I deal with who have lost complete self-confidence, they have no confidence, they are falling into states of anxiety, eating problems, fear. They have was it even falling into sort of like starting to have panic attacks and all these sort of like issues that start happening. They feel like that they've been, why? Because obviously they feel that they've been used and abused. I had, like, I'll give you an example. I had a couple, a family basically talking to me about what happened to their daughter. And she was just a young, mashallah, practicing Muslim sister, going to university. She saw someone that she liked and thought, this is mashallah, seems like someone that's decent. He's practicing. And all these, like, he seems like just a decent, genuine guy. So she likes him. She speaks to her mum about him. And then what ends up happening is, in university, they go, they sit, they talk a few times, and it sort of like moves on. And what he does is that he manipulates her in a way where he asks her, like, he basically shows her that he's all about marriage. He wants to get married to her. But then what ends up happening is it's almost like a predatory sort of like, I need to win, I need to get what I want. And this sort of like predatory nature. And when a young sister is sort of like put into this position where she thinks, this guy could potentially be my husband, he's promising me that he wants to like meet with my family, he wants to do this, he's got long-term goals and aspirations of getting married to me. Then when that brother, after a few weeks or months, starts to make requests, then what ends up happening is that you end up thinking that I need to fulfill this request so that he knows that I'm serious as well. Like, your mind starts to play games on you because you've become attached, emotionally attached. And so what ended up happening was that with this individual, she ended up going out for a drive and he wanted to talk. And then eventually he made a pass and he tried to kiss her. And when she declined, saying no, what ended up happening was that he apologized, and then a few weeks later he tried again, and then he's like I'm not getting what I want here. And then he starts to date her best friend behind her back. And with that, she fell into serious depression, and she felt that she was violated. She felt that her heart was broken because of the trust. He broke her trust. And then these are just little examples of things that are happening all the time. And so, again, on the other side, just to give you guys a different perspective, from a guy's perspective, there's, like I mentioned earlier on, there's a brother who ends up getting manipulated by the sister because she actually wants him for herself, and she manipulates him and then asks him to transgress bounds. So look, from both ends, you're going to have these sort of situations. And the reality is that I need everyone to understand that the most important thing that we have is our boundaries, and to be able to understand red flags, and to be able to hold ourselves back and keep specific boundaries there. And what I really want to do now is I want all of you guys to write down some of these boundaries. I've made a list of them. I'm just going to read them out. So I strongly advise all young couples going through the courting stage for marriage to never ignore the red flags in the beginning, or there'll be the same reason it all ends, okay? Never ignore the red flags in the beginning, or there'll be the same reason it all ends. So here are my top 12 key relational red flags to look out for during the courting session from a faith-based perspective. And I put this up a year ago, on my social media. So I'm just basically just reading off. So number one of the red flags that you should look out for is that the individual does not, from a faith-based perspective, he does not pray, and he or she, so does not pray, and he or she lacks religiosity. Okay. Number two, lack of communication. Okay. Number three, irresponsible, immature, and unpredictable. If you start seeing these things, okay, that's a red flag. Number four, lack of trust. There's like when you meet with your family or whatever the situation is, there's just a vibe that's not right. It's like you don't trust what he or she is saying. Number five, a red flag is significant family and friends don't like your potential partner. Believe it or not, you might be not seeing things that other family members or friends are seeing. And if you're ever in that situation where there's a significant amount of family and friends saying that, that's actually a red flag to keep an eye out for. Number six, addiction issues, pornography, for instance, drugs. These are things that obviously, these are questions that you have to discuss, especially in the courting stage. There's some fundamental questions that you have to ask. And so one of them is regarding pornography, which is a huge issue just now. A huge issue within the Muslim community. And the amount of clients that I'm dealing with whose marriages are literally just crumbling because of this addiction. And it's saddening. It's extremely sad to see, but these are things that have to be discussed before marriage. And a lot of these things are hidden, unfortunately. Number seven is controlling behavior. If you see controlling behavior during the sort of like the courting stage, know that that's a red flag. Number eight is feeling insecure in the relationship. So if you feel or sense like this individual seems to be very insecure, then understand that that's a red flag. Number nine, a dark or secretive past. Okay, a dark or secretive past. And number 10, a non-resolution of past relationships. Okay, the amount, I can't explain to you the amount of people that get married and then a year or two down the road, either the wife is back in contact with an ex, or the husband is back in contact with someone. Why? Because there's no resolution. There's not been an actual ending to past things. So if there's non-resolution of past relationships, it can come back and bite you. So you need to be able to be upfront and frank enough to discuss these things in the courting stage. The last two, number 11, the relationship is built on the need to feel needed. Okay? So if you feel that someone is just extremely needy and you feel like that relationship is just like that courting stage, it's almost like it's overbearing. And that you feel like that individual doesn't have like a sense of them, like fullness themselves, and they're almost coming to you starving and empty. And like, I need you, like literally coming with this situation, like I need you to complete me. I need you to fill me. I'm empty. Then understand that can turn out to become a very codependent relationship, and it can cause a plethora of issues down the road. So that's a red flag. And finally, the 12th red flag is, and of course, any form of abuse, from the seemingly mild to the overtly obvious, verbal, emotional, psychological, and certainly physical, is not just a red flag, but a huge banner telling you to get out immediately and never look back. And this is obviously, it's a full different discussion, but that is where you'll find some individuals, some personalities, some narcissistic personalities coming out, some abusive personalities coming out, some very kind of backward cultural sort of like realities coming out of that individual. So these are things, obviously, you need to, these are some 12 red flags I wanted you guys to know of. And I really do hope that you guys can sort of like take note of them, especially if you're in the premarital stage. There's something that I actually want to read here. That for any couple that are involved just now and you are emotionally attached, okay, and you've kind of started to cross boundaries, I need you to understand that, especially when you come to the sweet talkers, the chit chatters, you need to be very, very careful, because we unfortunately have a lot of situations. Like I deal a lot with people coming back to me saying like, oh my God, this person played me just through his words. He was such a chit chatter. He was so sweet. And you need to be very careful, especially for sisters here. I need you guys to understand, because I need folks to understand that people seem to sort of like take heartbreak differently, and men who are dealt a bad hand or they get played, they handle it in really, they sort of like go very inward. They become very passive aggressive. They don't tell anyone. They have a lot of anger issues then. They become sort of like, they lose self-esteem, self-confidence. There's a lot of these issues, but I'm seeing a lot of things where our young Muslim sisters get to the point where there's a lot of sort of like almost like suicidal tendencies, because they feel like this person, because some sisters have actually given up their virginity. They, like, some practicing sisters get into this rigmarole where they feel like, I need to do this because he keeps on asking me, or like, I need to do this to show that I'm committed. And it's almost like a fear. It's like, it's a deception of shaitan, obviously. And it's just an insecurity that they have. They feel that they need to do certain things to be able to show that they're committed. And unfortunately, some folks, they'll come, they'll have sex, they'll come, and then this person will just leave because they've got what they've wanted. And this is why I always say, and I'm a father of 5 daughters. And so for me, it's like, I really, 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 for me, it's something where every person I speak to, every family I speak to, and if I hear this, for me, it's like, I wouldn't want it on anyone's daughter. I wouldn't want some of the things, some of the ways that our sisters are played. I wouldn't want that on anyone. And so the thing is, like, we need to understand, all of us, that breaking someone's heart is deeper than we realize. It destroys their outlook on love. It shatters their heart, rips their self-esteem to shreds. It tortures their mind, and it damages their soul. Don't let them fall in love with you. Please, my dear respected brothers in faith who are there and you're involved with someone, whatever happens, understand that this could be your sister. This could be your daughter in the future that someone does this to. You need to understand, we have to be careful. And just like the sister mentioned in the beginning of this section, I read out her section, she said there's a lot of practicing, there's a lot of practicing people that are players. And this is something that I hear a lot. And unfortunately, and look, a lot of people might say to me, why do I always, like there seems to be this bias towards saying a lot of things regarding the sisters and so like less on the men, and why am I not focusing on the men? But I'm going to be brutally honest, and I challenge anyone on this. Quite frankly, in the years that I've been doing this, and with other fellow colleagues from around the world that I've been discussing this with, like literally 95% of my cases come from the sister's point of view, saying, look, this is happening in my marriage, and this is happening, I'm trying to salvage my marriage, or this has happened to me, and this has happened to me, and these are my cases. And then the odd 5% will be that's flipped, that the brother's being abused, that the woman, the sister's a narcissist. She's a covert female narcissist, and she's making his life hell, or he's actually been physically abused. Believe it or not, it happens. or that he's living in a very manipulative situation where he's completely like feels like he's just submissive and he can't do anything. These situations do happen, they do arise, but around the board, the vast majority of the cases, it's unfortunately happening to our sisters. And this is why I always bang on about this, because at the end of the day, the things that I hear from the people that are practicing and non-practicing sometimes it shocks me beyond, like, it just shocks me. Like, that how can people do this to someone and not fear Allah? And so that I just wanted to put out there, and that's something personal. That's just my outlook on things. I just feel like we should be very careful, because we men out there we have to be beacons of light. We have to be these knights, and we have to be gentlemen, and we have to revive old-fashioned principles and values. And our sisters, they need to see that in the men of today. They need to see strong, principled values when it comes to courting, when it comes to boundaries, when it comes to good old-fashioned values of, I like this sister, I'm going to go straight to the mother and father. It doesn't mean that I'm going to get married. It just means I'm going there because that's the noble, honorable thing to do. It's not, let's sit back. Sister, let's not get involved. Let's not get the parents involved. Let's give it a few months. That needs to stop. Okay, because unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's our sisters. Unfortunately, majority of the time, it's our sisters are falling into this. And a lot of them are sometimes falling pregnant, there's miscarriage, there's abortions behind the scene, there's family breakups, there's sort of like splitting up of families, there's disowning children, all of these things. Why? Because for that moment of time, they get emotionally attached. They fall in love, as they say. They can't see anything else. So that's something I wanted to bring up. And there's just a couple of other things I wanted to bring. So sisters, there's very important. Sisters, I would like you all to understand one thing, that one of the most important questions I get asked all the time is, if I'm dealing with a chit-chatter, or if I'm dealing with a sweet talker, how do I do it? Especially if they have the gift of the gab and I'm falling for it. The reality is that you just do not lower your standards. Keep your standards very, very high. And I spoke to a non-Muslim relationship specialist regarding this. And one of the things that he said, which shocked me, was like, he goes around teaching. This is not from a faith-based perspective. This is a non-Muslim. This is what he does. And he goes out there teaching classes and seminars to women, telling them not to lower their boundaries, to keep a very high standard. Because if you don't keep a high standard and you lower your standards, then what ends up happening is that this is why unfortunately, some, not all men, but some men will take advantage of that. They will take advantage of you mentally and physically, and some of them financially as well. So I need you guys to raise your bar, raise your standard, and know that if someone does this and is asking you to be intimate, flirtatious, do this, have your boundaries set up and do not cross them boundaries. And that you will start to filter and sieve out the players from the real knights and gentlemen of this ummah. You'll start to filter them out, because once, twice, thrice, if they can't get into you, they can't try you. If they can't get what they want from you, they'll just move on. And you'll know that they're not committed and they're not sincere. So look, please keep your standards very, very high. And just understand that we need to, as a community, as an ummah of young men and young women, we need to understand that we are living in a time that's very dangerous just now because of the access of social media and just internet and what we can do and what we can't do. Literally at a flick of a switch now. And I was speaking to a brother about this, one of my clients, and he was telling me that one of the reasons that he goes from sister to sister, sister to sister, promising, breaking the promise, promising, breaking the promise. Why does he do that? Because he feels like, why does he need to get married? Because he feels like at a tip of his fingers, he'll go onto some app, swipe right or swipe left, and if he wants, he can have sex that night. If he wants, he can have a laugh that night. And because he's bored, or because he just wants to go out with the lads, and then after that he feels a little bit horny, and it's like literally at a click of a finger, people can do that nowadays. And I'm talking about people who are practicing and non-practicing, unfortunately, and I'm really sorry that I have to say this, but unfortunately I've had to deal with families where they've come to me with this dilemma. And on the other side, I need you guys to understand that this is where we need to raise the bar. We need to start educating. We need to get our people, our leaders, our imams, our scholars to be talking about these hard issues like upfront. We need to start to implement a culture of premarital courses. The Jewish community and the Christian community have been doing this for like a couple of decades now. Like, they do not allow a couple to get married, and I've spoke to people who are in the field, in from churches, different church groups and different synagogues and Judaic groups, and I've discussed this openly with them, and they just have a firm remit. They're not allowed to get married until they go through and get a certified certificate that they've completed a premarital course. And this is something we as a community around the world have to implement within the Muslims. Why? Because it'll filter out a lot of issues. It'll filter out the emotional attachment. It'll start to like take away sometimes the burden that's in front of their eyes. So many times I've done premarital courses, and like 6 weeks or 3 weeks on, the brother's like, whoa, I'm actually after asking specific laser focused questions to both him and his potential wife, some specific questions. They'll turn around and go, I never expected that. I never knew that was your stance on children. Or I never knew that was your stance on this. I never knew this was your stance on that. And then discussing different levels of religiosity, discussing finance, discussing all these things. Like, they start to realize that's the beauty of premarital. It can also allow you to gauge in an in-depth, strategic way your future partner. And are you really compatible? And there's so many tests that you can do. There's personality tests, there's a Myers-Briggs test you can do. There's other Muslim, mashallah, matrimonial sites that I know who are following sort of like more stricter guidelines, and they also have compatibility tests, personality tests. These are the things that we need to do, is understand each other instead of blind infatuation and, oh, he's the one or she's the one, without any homework behind it. So we need to raise our bar, raise our standards, and get back to something which was good old-fashioned values. A lot of people in this day and age will be like, you're backward and you're old. What do you mean we can't go out ourselves and just sit by ourselves and get to know each other for a few months? And this, look, I'm not saying that every person that does that, they're going to go and fall into a ditch and they're going to start to commit transgress bounds Islamically. Not everyone was going to do that. But trust me, from a faith-based perspective, we know that if two people are in seclusion alone, according to what the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said the third party is a shaitan. You will be tempted. It will be much more difficult for you to stay back and not fall into the pitfalls and traps. Just we need to be able to have a healthy understanding, a healthy and a balance, and empower ourselves with some basic old-fashioned faith-based principles. And trust me, you will save yourself a lot of heartache. The amount of families that I see that break up because of this issue, then they end up going to court. It's nasty divorces. They lose children. Why? Because they were infatuated with each other. They never saw the red flags. A couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, you're like, who the hell is he? Who the hell is she? I want out of this. and you're like this and you're like that, you've done nothing for me, I'm taking the kids. And then it becomes a war about kids, and they weaponize the kids against each other, and then it falls into parental alienation. And that's child abuse in itself. These are some of the things that actually happen on the grassroots level. This is what's happening in our communities. So why not save ourselves a lot of heartache by empowering ourselves as a community, going to coaches, therapists, getting premarital coaches, getting therapy sessions, understanding yourself before you get married. A lot of people go to marriages void. They have gaping voids and trauma that they're carrying because of some childhood situations that they've had to go through. And what happens is that they unload all of that in their marriage, and the spouse is sitting there going, I can't handle you. Like, who are you? Or where did you come from? And why are you putting all this on me? You understand? Like, allow yourself to heal and understand yourself and be real. And something that a sheikh actually mentioned to me not too long ago, and something that floored me, absolutely floored me when I first heard this, and I think I might just sort of like end on that, is, and then we'll go to some Q&A, is he said to me that in this day and age, he said, yes, there's a lot of young brothers and sisters who are experimenting. They are in high school or secondary school, if you're in the UK, who are experimenting. They do end up getting a girlfriend. They do end up having a boyfriend. They kiss for the first time, and some of them go forward. Some of them are having sex, and some of them are dating, and some people are doing that within the Muslim community. There's no doubt about that. But the reality is that there are a lot of people who are raised in Muslim homes that are shy, and they've been raised with Islamic principles, and they're afraid. They don't do these things when they're in primary school or secondary school. And even though they're watching their friends at the age of 14 that actually like have girlfriend, boyfriend situations. I mean, when I was in school, my best friend had, his first sexual encounter when he was 13. And this is my best friend. And this is, he's non-Muslim, but that's just, and like, he'll take his girlfriends, and like as we were growing, he'll like, his mom and dad would be like, oh, so how's Jennifer, or how's Laura? And one year it's like he's solid with someone. It's like, it's normal. It's almost normalized. But for Muslims, it's like a identity crisis, because they're growing up in these schools and the environment, and they want to do that. They see what's happening at uni. But the sheikh said that they still have this moral compass in them. And so what ends up happening is that they'll go, some of them, and this is unfortunately something that happens a lot in university, a lot of Muslim brothers and sisters will go through primary school, high school, secondary school, college even, and get into university, and they've actually not had a girlfriend or boyfriend. But when that happens, when they get exposed, and there's not like, they have more chance, and it's like they're more exposed to having a lot more freedom and stuff like that, suddenly, it's almost like when someone comes to them and asks them for their hand, or they like them, they go weak at the knees, because it's like, someone likes me. Or a Muslim will say, like, I really want to marry this sister. She's part of the Muslims MSA, or she's part of forces, or she's part of this. I really want to marry her. And he approaches, and they start chatting. But because of this innocence that's in them, quickly they fall for each other, and they cross boundaries because they're not used to it. They're not, and I'm not saying that you have to go through the process and have heartaches, have multiple boyfriends and girlfriends. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying the sheikh explained something really deep. He said that they sometimes it's just their innocence, that they're like, they've never experienced something so intense, this emotion of someone fancying you or liking you or wanting your hand in marriage, and wanting to like chit chat with you, and then sending you a text saying, by the way, I just want you to know, like, you're everything that I've ever wanted in a husband or a wife. And that's what I'm saying. It can cause problems, because then like you can quickly slip. And so what the sheikh was explaining was like, this is sometimes could be the cause, because they've not had like somewhere a strong support network from back home, where they feel they're not shy or intimidated to speak to their parents. They can lean on their brothers and sisters, or an imam, or a person of knowledge that they can like confide in, because sometimes they're scared to do that. And so their feelings overtake them. So just realize that it's multifaceted, but the reality is that we have to just be able to have a system, a checking mechanism for ourselves, especially when we're going through the courting stage, and keep an eye on these 12 red flags. Watch out for getting emotionally attached, and understand that, and sorry, I forgot to mention, I'll end on this, the entire courting scene, whether it's Muslim matrimonial sites, whether it's the masjids getting people together to sort of like introduce each other, or the masjids have like contacts of people that are looking, or websites or families, or like was it the individuals in the community who bring couples together, whatever method, whatever's for you will not go by you. So you can use anything, because people are like, so are you against Muslim dating, matrimonial sites? No, whatever is meant for you will happen. But the only thing is, as long as you stick to your boundaries, whatever action you take, stick to the Islamic faith-based principles and values, fear Allah and understand where you stand. And trust me, what is for you will not go by you, inshallah. And you will have less chances of someone playing you and you having shattered hearts. I kind of went on slightly, but inshallah we'll move on to Q&A.
We have so many questions, though. I think we'll definitely need to maybe just choose a couple, and then maybe we'll PM you some, and you can answer in your own time.
Sure.
As you said in the event. Sure. I just want to quickly go, because we've got a lot of reverts here. Back to point number of the 12 points. There was one about dark or secret past. We've got a lot of reverts, obviously, that do have a very bad past.
Yes.
In jail, alcohol, prostitution, and all sorts of things. And obviously, we've got everyone telling us to keep it very, very, very quiet, and we don't have to tell our husbands about it. So how do you suggest that is gone about? Well, it might scare men off, because you're saying, someone with a secret or dark past shouldn't be gone near. How does that work?
Sure, no problem. Okay, thank you very much for that question. It is a very important question. Look, first of all, just a disclaimer: I'm not a sheikh, and I'm not here from a scholastic sort of scholarly position at all. So these are questions I can get much more I can speak to the shiukh that I trust, and I can get more information. But from the general gist of what I do know, which is that if it's sin, if it's ma'siyah, if it's sin that you've been involved with, that's something that, and you've made tawbah and you've repented, or you've come into the fold of Islam, everything is wiped clean. You understand? Everything is wiped clean. What I'm referring to is, if, for instance, you have a child now, let's just say you have a child, because I deal with this from time to time. I deal with these situations where I'll have a couple on, and the wife is saying, like, my husband kept it from me that back in the day, he had a relationship with this non-Muslim. She fell pregnant, and he never told me about it. But just because she was staying in a different country or different city, he never told me, because he doesn't have any communication or any link with her anyway. And the mum is not giving access to the child. So he's like, he keeps it quiet. But what ended up happening was that daughter, she was like 17 or 18, turned back and said, I want to find my biological father. And that took, and remember, and another thing was that he did say to her in the beginning, when they met, that he's never been with anyone. So there was a bit of deception there. He did say, like, you're my first, you're this, you're that. And then obviously, and when she specifically asked, you haven't got any, because she was actually someone that asked him, do you have any children, or what's your, or this or that? And he said, no. Do you understand? So that's like an example of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So I think maybe
it's
good to just say, look, I've got a past, but we're not going to go into it. Islamically, I don't need to do it. I'm not going to disclose my sins, and you shouldn't ask either.
Yes.
You know, if it's something you or your family are not comfortable with, because, as you said, we need to get along with the family. If it's something they're not comfortable with, maybe just leave, and maybe that brother's not for you. All right, we'll move on to another question. There seems to be a great need to get to know someone longer these days. What tips can you provide to get to know someone safely in line with Islamic principles? So I think that some people are really comfortable with a long engagement, and others want that nikah done straight away. Others are very comfortable with the engagement and not consummating, or no, sorry, doing the nikah but not consummating it till many months later, till the legal marriage is done. What's your opinion on that?
Okay, so there's a couple of things that you're mentioning there. So like the first thing is that when it comes to like the so-called engagement sort of stage, which we know is it's something that we don't really have, like, which is engagement in that sense, yeah. But the courting stage, how long should it last? Some people know until one is spread out over months and sometimes even, believe it or not, years until they feel comfortable enough or that they know that the person. This is actually, it's very, very dangerous grounds, because you need to be able to, as two mature adults, you need to be able to have some sort of ultimatum and boundary of our time scale when it comes to like getting married, because you're trying to mitigate anything happening that shouldn't be happening. Do you understand? You don't want to fall into like shady or grey matters within that period of time, especially if you're drawing it out and you're talking more and more and you're becoming more and more vulnerable with each other, and you're talking about deep, maybe personal things. And that's a very quick recipe to falling in love, or not in love, so like forming a deep attachment. So what I would say is have some boundaries and say, look, we're going to do this. We're going to give each other 12 weeks, 24 weeks, but we're going to like really like get everything out there, whatever we need to discuss with our family, with our like together, with a wali or third party, someone there, but we're going to ask each other everything that we need to ask. We're going to talk about marriage. We're going to talk about levels of religiosity. We're going to be talking about your expectations of intimacy. We're going to be talking about children in the future. We're going to be talking about finances. We're going to discuss everything under the sun, but we're going to give ourselves this amount of time. And by this stage, it's either Bismillah, let's go with this. You understand? Or I don't think so. You understand? And a lot of the time, believe it or not, a little bit of like a third party intervention, like a relationship specialist or someone in that, could maybe even sort of like direct you both to be able to ask some key questions that you might be missing out on, especially if this is your first time, especially if it's your first rodeo. It's like you've not been married before and you might be a little bit nervous, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, just having that official conversations might scare a lot of bad brothers off as well, you know. So let's scroll up some questions.
Or bad sisters.
Yeah, or bad sisters. Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah.
So, look, there's actually a lot of questions here.
Okay, fire away, inshallah.
I've heard that there are Islamic fiqh rules that permit men and women from speaking to each other on social media via text for the purpose of getting to know each other without third parties being attached to that call. Because it may be very uncomfortable getting to know someone in the presence of one's mum or dad, for example. Can you provide insight on this and share your thoughts? And someone else further on went to say, well, how do you get to know someone well enough then if you're not having chit-chatting with them? Okay,
look, I'm a realist. Okay, I'm not gonna say here, I know I'm not gonna spin around and sort of like act and say that everything has to be absolutely like in this pattern. It has to be like this. We're human beings. We're emotional beings. The reality is that we just need to keep ourselves in check. We need to have a checking mechanism upon us so that we do not deceive ourselves. Because believe you or me, chit-chatters and people like this that you meet on the front lines, they can very quickly spin you. They can spin your heart and your mind. So what I'm saying is that, look, if you're going to speak to someone on the phone, on WhatsApp or whatever it is, Bismillah, go ahead. But what I'm saying is this, that the moment you lower your boundaries and you lower your sort of like standards, it's a slippery slope down. And especially in this day and age where everything's over-sexualized, it's hyper-sexualized, everything. And especially if you have the younger generation, where, believe it or not, the younger generation, it's almost like bread and butter, that you need to be able to do certain things, you need to be able to communicate in a certain way to be able to understand and build a bond and get very close with each other. If you're going to be speaking to someone, because I'm dealing with the aftermaths of so many different people from so many different walks of life, I'm just going to say, look, be real, but at the same time, if you're going to be on WhatsApp or texting someone, have a group formed and just like ask the questions. If you're going to be shy to ask something that you don't want your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, a relative, or someone that you trust to hear about, then you need to think twice about what you're asking. If it's something genuine, if it's a genuine concern and you want to ask someone about, like, look, I want to know your stance on pornography, for example, yeah, you can send that as a side question if you want to do it to protect something. Like if he's hinted to yourself, and if you want to have a deeper conversation on that, then yes, you can maybe sort of like go and say, look, what's your stance on this issue, and you can maybe do that. But generally, I would recommend that you guys always have someone in the background somewhere, because that checking mechanism it's a blessing for us to keep us safe from ourselves and from other people playing us and jumping upon our vulnerabilities.
Okay, we've got a question that was PM'd to me. How important is the role of a family in someone's marriage if before marriage there is a lot of tension? I'm not married yet, but there's a lot of tension and bitterness and situations that happened between both sides of the parents, as well as between me and the guy's parents. I'm worried this will continue after the marriage. And I can't promise the guy I'm happy to forget everything that's happened. And you kind of get the picture, right? It's a long message.
Yeah. That's a very, see that, I get stuff like that all the time. And I can't do justice to that in a minute. That actually warrants a proper a session. Why? Because I need both of them on the phone. Because the reality is, like, you're either going to have to rise above it, and just like a very short answer, you're going to have to rise above it and to be able to get all the families together and sit around a table and actually thrash it out over the table and say, look, let's forgive and forget. These are qualities, these are good points, these are bad points, these are flaws, these are positives. Discuss it all openly and honest with both sets of family present. And in the end, if the families hug, shake hands, okay, let's do this, let's move forward, bismillah. But if there's still tension and gripe and stuff, my experience is it eventually escalates. Eventually, after the honeymoon, after this sort of 6-12 month period of time, things start creeping up. And it's all, and a lot of passive aggressive behavior starts, a lot of sort of anytime there's an argument, but can you remember your mum and your brother, what they said to me? And all of this sort of starts, this back and forth starts happening.
How to deal with situation group 1 and 2 if someone is deeply emotionally attached to a person in the courting stage and one sees the pattern on him herself and doesn't want to go further, but also doesn't want to hurt the other person when they end it on good terms. Just block
them. Okay. I'm going to recommend something to everyone. He's someone that I really listen to a lot. I read a lot of his papers that he produces, and I loved his TED Talk. He's a very sort of he's a specialist in psychology. His name is Guy Winch. Guy Winch is G-U-I and then Winch, W-I-N-C-H. He did a fantastic TED Talk on how to fix a broken heart. Okay. This is a book that I recommend everyone gets, How to Fix a Broken Heart.
Okay.
One of the things, and this is he's a Jewish psychologist, but he's mashallah top of his game when it comes to his field. And one thing that he actually mentions it in the TED Talk, and if you read his book, or if you read any of his, if you follow him on social media and stuff, some of the stuff that he says is very deep when it comes, because he specializes in that field of how to deal with a broken heart. And the first thing that he says is go cold turkey. He actually says you need to go cold turkey. It's like a drug. You need to understand becoming emotionally attached, falling in love. It's actually a drug. And after tons of brain scans and with modern technology, he actually quotes how after going through so many brain scans, and even Professor John Gottman, who's the leading founder of, he's a founder of the Gottman Institute, one of the most leading was the relationship institutes in the world where they're studying relationship science. He says the same thing in his books and his published papers, that it's a drug. Falling in love is a drug, and it's the parts of the brain that basically spark up. It's the same dopamine rushes. It's the same parts as though you're taking heroin. I mean, it's that powerful. Being in love is an addictive drug. And if you are in a point where you've become emotionally attached or fallen in love, you need to understand you're going to have withdrawals as well. You're going to have withdrawals. There's no denying it. It's been proven now, and there's so much research on this, that you're going to have withdrawals. And one of the ways, and this is why I recommend this book or listen to his TED Talk, Professor Guy Winch and Professor John Gottman and Sue Johnson and many others out there, they all say the same thing, which is you need to be able to call it cold. Why? Because if you need to say, look, this is not going to work. We're not compatible, or whatever you say, you put a block. And when I say a block, when your withdrawals start kicking, you need to block them from social media, WhatsApp, email, FaceTime, Google Chat, Twitter. You need to block them from every sphere. And once you block them, you're going to start the withdrawals. Trust me on this. You're going to be starting to twitch. You're going to be constantly reminiscing. You're going to start fading out all the bad, and you're going to start thinking of all the good things that you've ever done. That's your brain playing tricks on you. That's actually a chemical release, because it's your withdrawal. You're wanting to go back to that. You're forgetting all the bad, but you're wanting to. And this has also been in studies. It's research is why people who have got trauma bonds and stuff are have got especially with abusive partners or narcissistic partners, they develop a trauma bond. It's because of this sort of manipulation that's happening to them. And so what I'm saying is the only way to actually break free is to go cold turkey completely. And there's many other strategies and tools, but you can do research and read that. But like I said, one of the things that this top psychologist says is you need to cut access, stop everything, block, and then go through the healing process. And the healing process will be hard, but you will get through it. And understand one thing, that Allah Azza is with you. And remember, you always have options. You always have options.
Absolutely. When you leave something for knowing it's not going to essentially please Allah, He will, I promise you, will replace it with something better.
Definitely.
You'll be looking back at the other one going, what the hell? All right, on to the next one. Advice, brother. What about two individuals who are mature Muslims? One is divorced revert and the other is a widowed father. Both have met online, but due to COVID and travel ban, they can't meet up with Wally. And how can getting to know each other phase be halal when it's long distance and the sister is a revert living by herself? They don't want to rush into nikah just to make sure it's halal without actually knowing each other properly first. Of course,
especially for divorcees and stuff, and brothers and sisters that have been divorced. Look, at the end of the day, I understand the situation. I'm obviously dealing with it a lot, and the reality is, in this day and age, with technology there, and we can get people on. Look at the Zoom call, for instance. We can actually come on a call. You can have people from all different places jump on, and you can sort of have a conversation. People that you trust, that is. But if you're feeling kind of shy, you want to talk about some stuff that might be deep, then the reality is that you just need to know that you have to have some form of checking mechanism, because if you don't, and this I'm going to keep on saying this because myself and my colleagues deal with this so much. It's when you're vulnerable and you're in a vulnerable state, or you've been divorced before, you're multiple divorces, or if you have children and you're a single parent, and or you're a brother that's gone through a traumatic divorce and your wife there's been infidelity and she's cheated on you, and you're kind of like in shock and you're still healing yourself and you're wanting to meet someone, but you have trust issues. There's so many things that you want to discuss and talk about your fears and aspirations. But the reality is that, look, no matter what angle you come from, you have to be mature enough, trusting enough in Allah, trusting enough in the boundaries. You just need to have a checking mechanism in place, whatever that is, but you need to keep yourself in check. And I'm telling you, if you do that, you'll filter away a lot of the nonsense that's out there. Yeah, it's an automatic filtering process.
I think because the illusion of Western culture, you know, as you said, like, you know, people feel the need to get to know somebody, but this is actually an unhealthy attachment. It has blinded you. And I think that until you give it a go of, getting to know each other in a properly halal manner, I know it stresses a lot of reverts and a lot of Western culture people out. But I think once you give it a go, you'll find it's actually really, really beautiful. And just doing. Oh, actually, there's a question about istikhara and the difference. What the difference between istikhara and what's the other one when you're asking around about someone and you're asking your friends? What's that called? Hang on. Here we go.
Well, it's like you're doing your due diligence in the community about that person.
Istihara or istikhara? Istishara. Islamically, what should be done first? Istishara or istikhara? I didn't even know about the first one actually. But
I don't know the difference. I only know about istikhara, and the main thing is that istikhara is a lot of people have got a lot of myths about that and a lot of cultural sort of like understanding of istikhara. But istikhara is such a beautiful dua, and it's basically that you're just asking Allah for counsel. You're asking Him because He knows and you know not. Absolutely. And you're asking Allah to facilitate. And the thing about it, and just quickly for istikhara, is it doesn't mean that you don't know what to do and then you make istikhara and then you're going to get a dream or a sign on the road when you're driving, or you're going to get a special envelope. It's none of that stuff. The reality is istikhara is that you've done your due diligence. I'm going to repeat this. Istikhara is when a Muslim does their due diligence on that aspect that he's wanting or inquiring about, or a job opportunity or a spouse. You do your due diligence on that person. After you've done your due diligence, you ask people of your own due diligence, you do your own research, then you ask people of knowledge or people around about you that you trust with knowledge, and then you put your trust in Allah and you say, Allah, I've done my due diligence, I'm thinking of doing this thing, I want to go down this route. You know and I know not, guide me to what's best, I need your counsel. And then what ends up happening is, if it's meant to be, the doors of rahmah, like the mercy, the doors will just open. The thing will be facilitated with ease. Like that thing that you want will happen with ease, and things will start moving forward. They'll be productive. I mean, things will be productive and empowering, and things will just move forward in that way. But if you start finding doors closing and things becoming more constricted and more difficult, and like that's kind of a sign like this is maybe not the right thing. Do you understand? So that's the thing about istikhara, and Allah knows best.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think maybe just one more question.
Yeah, there is. I was going to say there's quite a lot of questions, but I think if we just wrap it up. Let's pick one. Do you want to have a quick look through the chat and pick one yourself, or?
I actually can't for some reason. I can't.
Okay, so if someone's been cheated on, it will take a long time to work on trust issues. Advisable not to look for a potential spouse until he'll actually, that's not a question. Hang on. Advisable not to look for a potential spouse until you are healed. Would be good for Brother Qasim to comment on that. So that's actually very good. We always see a lot of people try and move forward as soon as they've got the even we've seen girls, and I've told them you absolutely can't do this. They're waiting for the divorce to go through, but they're on these marriage apps, you know, because they want to get distracted.
Okay, look, I'm going to be brutally honest with you. Is that okay if I'm brutally honest and frank here? Look, and see, when someone Scottish says I'm going to be brutally honest, it's going to be hardcore honesty, okay? Look, the reality is we need to be very careful about a term called rebounding. Okay, in our sort of like sphere of relationships and relationship science, there's a concept called rebounding. You need to be careful about that. A lot of people fall into a pattern of rebounding, and I've seen a lot of brothers do this. I've seen a lot of sisters do this. Why? Because there's a few reasons. One is the basic one, which is sexual frustration. Especially for brothers, it's like sexual frustration. And they're looking to find someone to be a partner with, to fall in love again, and obviously intimacy. And again, with the sisters, it's the same thing. It could be sexual frustration. It could be just, again, wanting to feel needed, wanted to be validated, wanted to be told that you're special, you're this. That's enticing. That's a drug in itself. You understand? So there's many reasons, okay, that people rebound, and one of them can be loneliness. One of them can be because they're completely in despair, and they're in despair because of their state, their age. They might have children, and they're like, I just need to get anyone, because who's going to take me? Do you understand? Like, and this is something that, but you need to have the discipline to be able to just hold back your feelings and your emotions, just hold them back. And actually do things in a structured way. I know your heart will be like bursting out to find companionship and love and respect and companionship. That's all wonderful and beautiful. But the last thing you want is to find someone and you've lowered your guard, you've lowered your self-worth, your sort of like, I guess, yes, your self-worth. You've lowered your standards. And then both for men and women, and what ends up happening is that you just jump onto the first thing that you see, thinking that's my queen, or that's my knight in shining armor, and they're going to look after me, and things are going to be hunky-dory. And then unfortunately, all starts going pear-shaped, because after the sex, after the initial companionship and the first 6 months of traveling and doing this and doing that, you're like, wow, I never knew this aspect about you, madam. Or, oh, wow, I never knew this aspect about you, mister. And then it starts. Then, like, oh, I never realized this red flag about you. Why didn't you tell me that you had this issue? Or why didn't you tell me? I mean, there's lots of people that fall into like this situation. My only advice is take it step by step. And I need to say this, and I need to end on this.
Yeah.
With Allah's permission, what's for you will not go by you. Just trust me, what's for you will not go by you. I'm divorced myself. I've been divorced. You understand? I know the situation. I've been in, and I'm being vulnerable here with all of you. I've fallen into a state of despair when I was younger, thinking, like, what's happening to me? Why am I, do you understand, so bad in relationships? Why am I like this? Why am I like that? There was like, and I made a plethora, so many mistakes in my life. But this is why eventually I sought out counsel from the ulama, from specialists within the field, studied, eventually wrote a book about it. And like, I kind of like took myself and like grounded myself to know my own patterns, because I knew I was destructive, or I had this self-destructive pattern because of loneliness. And I know where it stems from. It stems from the sudden death of my mum when I was younger. So I figured myself out. And so the thing is now that people need to figure themselves out. They need to heal. They need to understand themselves from a deeper perspective and have full yaqeen and trust that what's for you will not go by you, as long as you do what you have to do, which is your morning and evening adhkar. You're praying 5 times a day. You're giving your sadaqah. You're doing you've got a special concentrated amount of dua for this one thing, and you're doing it at the times where it's answered by Allah. And then you're doing your due diligence when it comes around. When someone is presented to you, you're doing your due diligence on that person. Yeah. And then you're moving forward with Istihara and Bismillah. Whatever's meant to be is meant to be. Jazakallah khairan.
Yeah, Jazakallah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I pray that benefited the brothers and sisters listening.
Alhamdulillah. So I wanted you to share your book link with us. Your there's a few things.
Yeah, I can basically sum it all up. Everything is available on my website. So if you just jump onto my website, it's just my first name and my surname. So it's QasimRafique.com. That's it. Everything is on there. The links to my published book. There's viewing materials there with other specialists in the field of like narcissism and relationships. There's obviously everything about premarital, couples coaching, relationship coaching. There's coaching for men. There's coaching for families. All information is online. So it's www.QasimRafique.com. And obviously on there, or you can follow me on social media. I try my best to put up a lot of free, valuable content on a daily or like every second day. I try to put up a lot of stuff for brothers and sisters that they can have a lot of access to a lot of, inshallah, valuable content. And just obviously you can stay in touch with me. And you can, if I'm doing any other podcasts, any talks, any seminars, any lectures, inshallah, all the information is on there. Inshallah. Thank you so much to Melbourne Muslimahs, mashallah. May Allah reward all of you guys all of you sisters for your mashallah amazing effort, and the Australian Muslims on whole, mashallah, and for wherever you are in the world watching this, may Allah reward you, and thank you for listening.